right, welcome to this week's edition of the Old Paratrooper podcast. And today I'm joined with a very, very special guest, an old friend of mine, former paratrooper, adventurer, and author, Christian Lewis. How are we doing, pal?
Hello, mate. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. It's been a while.
God, yeah, we were just chatting off here then. We worked out about 20 years because we both left the military about the same time, didn't we? So,
Mate, it's so scary. Where does it go? 20 years, eh? I noticed that we're both donning grey beards and goatees now, so time
mate,
has
it's not
flown.
the only grey hair. My chest hair is grey, my shoulder hair is grey, you name it. It's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
going
fair
grey,
play, mate.
mate.
Fair play.
So yeah, kind of. We touched on before. You've seen a couple of the podcasts. I like to start at the beginning and give the viewers a bit of a background to yourself.
Yep.
You know, your upbringing, where you grew up, and then what led down the road and the path that you took in life. So, over to you, pal. Where did you grow up?
So yeah, mate, I'm originally from Reading, in Berkshire. And yeah, mate, all was good. You know, I had a steady childhood and stuff like that. And then you know, eventually my parents would like split up, and it was quite a messy one, if you know what I mean. So it was around that sort of time when I was, you know, coming into life, a part of life where, you know, what are you going to do with your life? And I ended up just joining the army because I didn't feel like there was anything else I could do. Or, you know, before I joined the forces, I've been sleeping on mates' couches, and I'd like left home young, sleeping on mates' couches and all that sort of stuff. So I was already preparing myself for that, even though I didn't know it. But yeah, mate, in 1996, I signed that line to come into the Paras. So yeah, that's where it all started for me, mate.
Was it always going to be the reg, or was there other kind of avenues, or how did you stumble upon the reg? Because I remember having this chat with someone else. I was joining a completely other unit up until about a day, 2 days
Yeah,
before, and then I joined the Paras at a suggestion from a best mate. So kind of, was it always the Paras for you, or?
mate, it was exactly the same for me. What you just said. So I went into the careers office, and it was RGBW, Royal Gloucestershire, Berkshire, and Wiltshire Regiment, and they were the ones, you know, as a full screw that was in there, you know, trying to get people into his battalion. So when I went into week one, day one of training up in Lichfield, it was a power edge guy. I forget his name, a ginger guy, that was taking like the BFT and everything like this. And I was fit, you know, I'd been putting in a lot of hard work and training, and, you know, I was never being given lifts anywhere. So I didn't realize how hard I'd been training, you know, to get in. And this power edge guy, when we did it, I just annihilated everybody. And he turned around and said to me, I didn't even know that I could join the Paras. It wasn't even a thing. They hadn't mentioned anything like that to me. So yeah, he said to me, have you ever thought of joining the Paras? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And as soon as I'd said that, everyone else went away. He took me into an office with a couple more full screws. And I believe the parachute regiment sergeant major at Lichfield at the time, they just took me in the office and absolutely beasted me. Just four of them stood there, absolutely hammered me, mate. But I clearly passed their test, and that was it, mate. I transferred over to basic training in Lichfield for the Paras then.
And what year was that? 96.
Yeah, that'd be the end of 96. Yeah.
Yeah, so you were about. I was kind of mid to end 97, so about a year roughly
Yeah.
before I joined.
Yeah, maybe even. Yeah, I think so, mate. It's a long time ago. I can't even remember now.
Yeah. God, yeah. Tell me about it. So yeah, you kind of obviously you joined. How did you find basic and depot? Because yeah, basic was at Lichfield, wasn't it? Same as me. So yeah, how did you find that?
Do you know, mate? I absolutely loved it. It was the first time that I'd been settled for quite a long time. You know, I had a roof over my head. I had food. You know, I'm not the. I don't take to learning stuff in a classroom very easily. I haven't got the patience for it. So, you know, I found that side of it very hard. But what I had on my side was the fact that I was really fit. I was always training, even after a day of training. I still went out and ran and did stuff. So I was not lucky because I put the work in, but I suppose I was fortunate that the hard work I was putting into the fitness side of things meant that when I was in a classroom, I could pay full attention, whereas a lot of the boys were falling asleep and getting in trouble for it. You know, I had to work hard for that sort of side of things, if that made sense. But, you know, I loved it, mate. I felt part of something, and I hadn't felt like that for a long time beforehand. So it's, yeah, looking back, it was great fun.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's I find Depot. I've made no secret of the fact I find Depot hard, both physically and not so
Yeah,
much the kind of the administration side or even the soldiering side. I took to that, but I did found the fitness side of it quite
yeah, yeah,
difficult because I think I'd underestimated it. But that kind of leads me on because I remember kind of it was a bit later on in battalion and stuff, but I remember you literally being one of the fittest. And I'm not even blowing smoke up your arse here. I remember you being one of the fittest paratroopers I'd come across
yeah, yeah,
because you were doing like sub sort of 7-10 BFTs and probably
yeah.
even quicker than that, weren't you? So
It was, yeah. But you know what, mate? I had a bit of an obsession with it. It was my release because I was quite stressed out before I came into the forces. You know, I'd had a bit of an unsteady time before joining up, and just being outside and beasting myself, not knowing how hard I was doing that at the time. It was my release, mate. It was my outlet. You know, when I was angry or frustrated or anything like that, I just got up the hills and smashed it. And it even continued when I went in because, you know, whereas a lot of the boys, every opportunity they were going home and you know, getting pissed basically. I would just stay back and always train. So I put a lot of effort in for it. But yeah, I was definitely a fit bloke, and I like to think that I still am.
yeah, no, fair play. Well, you must be fairly fit, mate, to have embarked on the journey that you've just completed. But we'll come on to that in a minute. We'll come
Yeah,
on
yeah,
to that.
yeah.
But yeah, so obviously off up to Catterick phase 2. I think that's where I kind of met you for the first time because I'm right in thinking you got injured and then got back squatted for a little
Yeah,
bit.
mate. So coming back now I think about it. Yeah, it would have been. I remember having my 17th birthday when I was in Lichfield. So that would have meant that I was there in '97. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's where I would have known you. But yeah, Catterick again. That was a whole new ball game. Yeah, I got injured. I did my knee in, if I remember. We were on exercise somewhere and we were doing pairs fire, and I just landed on a rock and done my knee in, which was really stressful because I'd worked really hard, like we all had. You know, I'd made some good friends whilst we were in training. You know, that bond that you make, and to get back squatted over a stupid thing like cracking your knee on a rock was quite frustrating. So I really found it difficult watching everybody sort of like pass out and go into battalion, and sort of have to sit back knowing that I had, say, like another 6 weeks left. Yeah, that kind of crushed my soul a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's bound to. Like you say, you form them bonds through basic training, and then you
Yeah,
see them go off, and you do
yeah,
see
yeah,
people fall by the wayside that kind of leave or transfer halfway through. You
yeah.
see people go over to kind of the kind of was it Willie? I can't remember what it was called. Was it Williams? Oh, I can't remember.
Something
We
like
used
that.
to go
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
were injured. Yeah, something like that.
yeah.
But yeah, like Catterick was a different ball game altogether. And like I say, I've been quite open about failing P Company. One of the horriblest moments on a couple of occasions. The horriblest moment, like being told that you failed and marching off to one side and seeing everyone kind of
Oh,
get their
yeah.
maroon machine. You know, it's so the same sort of thing, but in a different way. You know, you get back squatted. Obviously, you bounce back. I think I remember seeing you knock around on crutches at one stage. So obviously, it was quite a
Yeah.
nasty injury.
Well, it,
But
it was annoyingly, it was after P Company. And do you know, mate, I remember I really felt for the boys, knowing how nervous they were that, like yourself, that ended up, you know, failing on P Company. I remember calling the names out and you know, saying, you know, what failed, and just my head going down, just thinking, oh my God, the soul just must be so destroyed because it's not an easy feat, is it, P Company? Um, I was sort of at the opposite end of the scale. I ended up being P Company champion, but because I got back squatted straight after on exercise, I never received that. I was gutted because I got to the next. Yeah, I had to wait for the next platoon to come up. So the next platoon, their guy was the P Company champion. So I never received my little plaque for that, and I'm always be gutted about that.
no way. Well, look, we can see if we can reach out and if we can get to the
Yeah,
right
yeah,
people and get you like an honorary P Company champion. But it's quite a big deal, you know, especially at that
yeah.
age.
Too
You know,
right.
P companies just to get through P companies hard enough without getting injured or you know
Yeah, yeah,
accumulating the
totally.
right amount. But so to come and get P Company champion, I always think that's a massive
Yeah, mate.
achievement. So.
At the time, there's only like 625 people that had ever had that. So yeah, I was really proud of it. But oh well, one of those things, mate. One of those things.
Oh well, life goes on, doesn't it? Oh
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
mate.
Life goes on.
Uh, yeah, so you kind of passed out of depot off to two para,
Yep.
straight in. Did you go to a rifle company or
Yeah, D company. Yeah, I
D
went
company?
straight into
Yeah,
D company. Yeah, I mean, Mate, you know, all I can think of, and I'm sure you can remember all this, all I can remember of all of that was those first few months where all the, you know, people that have been in a while would just come in at God knows what time of night, airborning us out of bed, roll map fighting with my mate Martin Tattersall. Yeah, that was awful. I will never forget that as long as I live. I tell people about that now. Just getting out of bed, the boys coming in and lifting the bed up and throwing you out of it. And yeah, that seemed like it went on forever. I remember Lee Proud specifically. Proudy, yeah. I remember all of that.
But yeah, the thing is, yeah, I do remember. An older shot was a very, very strange place, and I remember the Thursday nights, and I remember some of the new blokes going to sleep in the cars because the
Yeah. Oh,
Thursday night
100%.
whenever been
Yeah.
out on the town. And I remember it got to a point, and I got to a point where two lads come in to kind of drag me out of her, and I was like, look, if you drag me out of this bed, there's going to be, I don't care what happens. I tell you now, I'm taking one of you with me. And it just got
Yeah.
to that point, didn't it? And then it was a bit the end. And I think they were a bit like, okay, we'll go pick someone else then. We'll leave him alone.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Brutal.
no, older shot was it was an interesting time. So yeah, we spent well, you I could say probably about 18 months, 2 years in older shot, didn't we? Before we
Yeah.
went to Colchester. Did you go
Yeah.
on the
Been,
first island tour in Ottnacloy then?
yeah, I was Dungannon. Yeah, it's
Right,
East,
that's right.
East Tyrone. Yeah, I was up there. I remember. So at that one thing I'd always wanted to do was drive, and we hadn't been in that long. And I don't know what it was, but I had this obsession with wanting to drive, and I was quite new into it. And I remember one of the boys coming in and saying, "Look, they're looking for volunteers for someone to go into the MT," and I just didn't know what that meant, but it meant that we'd get our driving license or HGV. So I got really excited about that. So I just put my hand up. And so I ended up going into the MT whilst we were in Dungannon. And I did all my driver training and everything there. And I loved it. You know, I was only, 19 years old, and I had my bus license, my HGV license, all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I just plowed my time into doing that, to be honest with you. But my real passion was fitness and at the gym. So I knew that's where my heart lied. I just wanted to get in with the gym stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the MTs, obviously, sometimes it's kind of given a bad name because some of the people that go there.
Yeah.
But obviously, I know you, and I know you're a very switched on lad and was a very fit soldier. So it's a bit of an unusual place for you to have gone. But on the flip side, in Northern Ireland, the MT and that did a lot of undercover moves. They were carrying pistols, which was a
We were
bit
busy.
different back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were busy. And yeah, you're right. I think, looking back, I was so young and I was so new to battalion that I didn't realize what I was doing. There's no doubts about it that if I'd have probably stayed in the rifle company, then I would have certainly headed towards maybe like the patrol side of things um and all of that. But when you're young, naive, and you have no idea how it all works, I didn't know what I was doing. So yeah, that's just the way it went, mate. It's the way the path laid out for me.
Yeah,
But we
no,
were always
absolutely.
busy. We're always busy, certainly in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, busy time. But I think a busy time again. We just chatted for about the same amount of time, 6, 7 years in the Reg, and it was a kind of busy period. I've been quite open about the stuff that we did. There wasn't a lot of kinetic stuff, like there wasn't a
Yeah,
lot of action, as it were. But it was a
yeah,
busy period of time. Like we did. I got 3 tours of Northern Ireland in 2 6 months and a short one over 6 weeks. Macedonia, Sierra
yeah.
Leone, Afghan. Did you go on the Iraq tour, or was you on rear party around that
No,
time?
mate. I met a woman whilst we were in Northern Ireland. It was my ex-wife, and we'd had a child, and she had become after. This is when we were still in. No, we'd moved to Colchester by this point, and she became really, really ill after having our little. And so I actually got put onto a posting to go back out to Northern Ireland. So I did a 2-year tour over in Northern Ireland, essentially just being there to help look after my kid because boys were getting posted all around at that point. So I was out there, and if I remember rightly, it was there that I decided to come out because I wanted to. So I effectively spent the last 2 years of my military career, not with the Paras. I was attached to a Scottish regiment, so I spent that in Northern Ireland. And there's parts of me that really, really regrets that, if I'm honest with you. But I'd never be where I am now if I'd have not done that, if that made sense. So yeah, I spent the last 2 years without any of the lads over there with some Scottish regiment. So I got out because I wanted to get custody of my kid. in the end, and that was in 2004. So that's where it all ended for me, mate. You know, I remember the boys actually coming over to Northern Ireland and seeing them all again. It broke my heart. You know, I was very ready to get on the plane back with them, but obviously kids come first, don't they? So
No,
yeah,
absolutely, Paul. No, well, you never, like I say, the weird bit is, for whatever reason, when people leave the military and that, you kind of think, well, I'll be down next weekend, I'll see everyone, or I'll be down in a few weeks' time. And I think it was something like 7 years or 8 years before I went back on some form of reunion that I actually kind of helped organize, because I wanted to see the guys.
Wow.
And then life just gets in the way, doesn't it? And then before you
does.
know it, like we've just said, it's been 20
Yeah.
years since the senior. There's other friends I kind of speak to from time to time, but you know, I went over to Australia quite recently and I bumped into a lad,
Nice.
Ray Smith, that were in D Company. And the last time I saw him was 20 years ago, and he come wandering across this beach, full head of grey hair, full grey beard. And I was like, who's this little old man walking over? And then he was like, it's crazy, isn't it?
Mate, because in your mind, they're still the same as what you saw them the last time. So, oh yeah, it's a real spin out. You know, I've seen quite a few of the boys like that. I didn't keep in touch with anybody. Life was so busy once I'd left that I can honestly say, apart from one or two boys that I just saw by chance, I never kept in touch with anybody after leaving. But I felt bad about that. But the more people I speak to, the more I realise actually a lot of people that leave the forces just go their own way and do their own thing. And it's only really a certain few, I think, that keep in touch. Facebook and stuff's really helped with that now. But we didn't have it back then, did we? So, yeah, crazy, mate. It's just surreal to see people again.
Yeah. It is, but I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, like you say, because I know people that kind of left and then stayed in Colchester, and then they were constantly like being, oh, back in my day, I moved away from it and went on to a completely different career with the close protection of whatever it was I did. So you kind of, you leave, if you close the book on that chapter,
of course,
and then you
100%.
move on. And I think that's necessarily a good thing as well, you know?
Yeah, I have to say, I now that I'm out and I've got touch with a lot of the boys again, I can really see how much it stayed with them, if that makes sense. Even though they're doing different things now, it's their life. That's all they'll ever sort of, you know, see themselves as, I suppose, which is great. You know, in many respects, it's great. But there's other people that leave, and like you said, that's it. It was my first job. That chapter's closed. I'm going to move on and do other things. And I was certainly one of those. It was only really once I started what I'm doing now that it kind of reopened my that box, if you like. But yeah, it's crazy how that works. You know, it really, really is.
Yeah, but it'll always be with you, and it's something that we're all immensely proud of, serving for the unit we did, and the stuff that we did and everything else. But I never wanted to be kind of institutionalized by it. And they're like
exactly
you quite rightly say, there's people that kind of and I, like I say, I talk about it where people get pissed off with me talking about it all the time. Well, was you in the Paras? Oh yeah, no shit. But you know, but because I'm immensely proud of it. But I always wanted to have lots of different life experiences and not be like almost like a one-trick pony. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Lots of people go through life and choose a profession and stick with it. I just wanted to do lots of different things, and plus I get bored dead easily. And I feel like you're a bit very similar to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you kind of you left the reg. You kind of you got custody of your child.
Yeah, it was a good 4-year battle in the end. In between, I stayed over in Northern Ireland and I lived there, and I was doing all sorts, mate. I started boxing, and I was boxing down in a club in Bangor, and you know, because of that, it led me on to doing like door work around Bangor and Belfast and all these places. Because at the time I was quite a big guy, and you know, it's quite crazy when you think about it. Ex-Power Edge guy doing door work in Belfast, and yeah, it got quite hairy at times.
Just a bit.
But you just don't care, do you? Just indestructible. You know, that's how you feel. It's certainly how I felt. But yeah, I think it was around that sort of time that, you know, I wasn't there because I wanted a career. I particularly wanted to stay there, and I mean that with no disrespect. I was there because I wanted to get custody of my kids. So I was just doing whatever I could to make some money to keep me there. So I never left the reg and thought, right, this is what I want to do with my life. It was immediately into sort of, shit, what am I going to do now? I need to get custody of my child in order to do this. I have to do this. And it was quite a bit of a battle. if you like. But I eventually did, and if I remember correctly, I ended up winning custody in around 2000 and must have been about 2006, 2007 actually. So yeah, a good few years of courts and all of that sort of stuff. And when I got the custody, I had moved to England, into like Northamptonshire area, and it was only then that I thought, oh my God, I'm 27 years old. All I've done the parachute regiment thing, and I've came out, and it's all just been one big fight to try and get custody of my kid. And I had no idea who I was, mate. I had no idea where. I had no purpose apart from my kid, obviously. So I never. All it seemed to be for me, and I think this is where a lot of my problems started, was it was all just constant battles all of the time. And I never actually sat back to think, right, what do I want to do with my life or anything like this? And yeah, I honestly think it was that first time in my life where I'd sat down, took a deep breath, and thought, right, where do I go from here? I've now got a child who depends solely on me. I ended up working as like a personal trainer, and I didn't like it at all. You end up becoming a counsellor, if I'm perfectly honest with you. That's how I felt. So yeah, I just wasn't enjoying any of that side of it, mate. And I think that's a little bit where the spiral started.
So yeah, you talk of the spiral. So if you're happy to talk about kind of how did it kind of spiral out of control, and how did you end up at kind of in a bit of a bad place then?
Well, I think I've always said, mate, joining the forces, there's two types of people, and I think that you've got the one on one hand, you've got the people that have always wanted to be in the army, have always wanted that career, have always wanted to, be in the forces and live that sort of lifestyle. Even like you look at officers that go to university to do this kind of stuff. And then you've got on the other hand the kind of people that go into the forces because they feel they've got no other way out. And I was definitely the latter. So my issues didn't necessarily come from the forces at all. It came from before I joined. And because we were so busy doing stuff, I hadn't paid any attention to it. I just kind of swept it under the carpet. And it was only when I'd left, I was useless with money. Every week was Millionaires Weekend, and every month was Millionaires Weekend. Spend all of our money, and it's all okay because you can still eat and stuff like this. So I had no grasp of reality whatsoever. I was quite frankly a 14-year-old in a 27-year-old's body, really. And yeah, something over the years of having Caitlin, I focused all of my energy and time just onto her and never on myself. And because I wasn't sorting out my own issues, it started getting worse and worse and stressing me out. And I started to become really anxious and really depressed because I wasn't dealing with anything whatsoever. I just had that same old mentality as so many of the boys of just, keep moving forward, you'll be all right, unbreakable, all this sort of stuff. But it turns out everyone has a breaking point, don't they, mate? And yeah, that's what happened. Full depression and anxiety.
Wow, yeah, that is, and the weird bit about the reg is it teaches you to be this self-sufficient soldier in the field. You can look after yourself, you can admin yourself, you can take care of yourself. But everyday kind of things, paying bills, saving money, because you kind of get all that done for you in the military. You just
of course, of course.
That it's like almost my fiance calls it, oh, we've got to do some adulting today, and I'm like, oh no,
nice
I don't fancy that. Yeah,
I might tell fancy that one.
Sounds sounds quite boring, and I'm not very good at it, and I'm still now not very good at it. And like you said, you had the money in your pocket. What you had in the bank was to you to go and squander, and then you'd live like a pauper for 3 weeks. But that's not the real world when you're in the military, is it, so to speak?
No,
so then when you come out, you're not prepared. And if you're obviously you're a single parent as well, which is hard. And your focus was, like you say, on your child, which is the right thing to do, but there is a balance to try and looking after yourself and maintaining your mental health, your physical, and everything. And these things all work hand in hand as like a balance, don't they? So obviously,
totally, mate. So I think one of the other things as well, you put up on such a pedestal when you're in, aren't you? You're sort of I wouldn't say the be all and end all, but you're a paratrooper. Whatever you do in life, people are going to have you because you're this person. And actually, the reality is, when I came out, mate, I was scratching for jobs. I couldn't even get a job in Tesco's. You know, whether that was maybe a little bit overqualified or whatever, but I was struggling just to get jobs, just to pay the bills, and it kind of soul destroyed me. I thought, how dare you? You know,
Yeah.
I've been made to think that when I come out, no matter what job I applied for, because of my background and what I did, they're just going to snap me up. And I ended up, I did, as a resettlement, I did a close protection course. I don't know what I was thinking, because I wanted to get custody of my kids. So the last thing I wanted to be doing was going away and, you know, being away from her. So that was just ridiculous. So I just came out with nothing, no qualifications or anything like this. Yeah, it just, I was soul destroyed, mate, not being able to get a job in Tesco's. I was working in petrol stations. I was working on Christmas tree farms. I was working as a salesperson. Anything I could do just to get a few quid in, just to feed us, I was doing. And I hated every single one of them. I hated it.
Yeah,
with a passion.
it is a hard one. It is a hard one. It is, because it's a difficult kind of thing to then live up to, having done what you've done. Like you said, you become almost like cult status, isn't it? And it is, marriage is like that for one, you know, and that's what makes the brotherhood and makes the soldiers as good as they are because of that. But like everything you do after that for afterwards never really lives up to it. And it's not until you get older that you feel you become a bit more comfortable in your own skin, don't you? And you realize it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, exactly.
Proud of it, but there is other avenues and everything else. So so kind of, when did you, because I might, correct me if I'm wrong, I read somewhere that you kind of ended up in a really bad way, like kind of you were homeless and stuff. Is that, how did that come about?
So it was very much down to not dealing with things, mate. You know, I was sweeping stuff under the carpet, especially when it comes to bills and stuff like this. I didn't know the reality that if you know, just ignored stuff, that people are going to come banging at your door. So I didn't realize that. And I had already, you know, slipped by this point. I was already becoming very anxious. You know, it was coming to a point, mate, when letters were coming through the door, my fists were clenched. I was anxious. My shoulders were clenched, and it took a real physical form for me. So it just made it worse and worse and worse. So I just wasn't dealing with any of it, mate. And then, you know, debt collectors were coming to my doors, taking away mine and my daughter's stuff, my cars, my only means of transport to get anywhere, to get to work. You know, anything that I had was going, and to a point where it just got me so down that, you know, I ended up not dealing with anything, and that included sort of, like, I was living in a council flat at this point, and you know, I wasn't dealing with that either. So there's absolutely zero compassion when it comes to, you know, people like myself as a single parent. No one really sort of came around and said, look, we understand you're going through some stuff, we'd like to help. And instead they just evicted us. So me and my daughter ended up sleeping in the car, sleeping from friends to friends, you know, just until we could get ourselves back on our feet, which I found impossible because I had no vehicle. I was still taking Caitlin to school. You know, I'd have to run to school to come and get her. I kid you not. I'd have a skateboard and I'd tie it around my waist, put her on the skateboard because I didn't want her getting tired from all of the walking, and then run her, you know, with her hanging on the back of the skateboard, run her back to, that was the state I'd got myself into, mate. I felt like, if anything in life, I don't care about money, success, houses, cars, and all this sort of stuff, but if anything, the one job you need to be good at and succeed in is being a parent. You know, that's the one job that I felt, if I'm going to fail at anything, not that, you know, and that's what I felt I was doing. So it sent me, you know, down to a point, mate, where she had, you know, Caitlin had decided at the age of around 16 that, you know, I was too much. She could see my decline. So she decided to move down to Bournemouth, to fly the nest and move down to Bournemouth to go and get a college down there. The intention was to go to college and then to go to university. And yeah, that she left then, mate, and that was it. I was kind of, I failed. You know, that's it. I'm done. I have no purpose in life anymore, and I didn't feel good at all.
That's what I was going to say. You know, you've lost your kind of, like you said, the one thing that you were focusing on. You've then lost, and
I managed to mess that up as well.
Yeah, isn't it crazy the situation you're in as well? Like, you're touching back there, what you've said about how you can't make ends meet, so you're trying to. It's not like you're sat in your house not trying to work. You're trying
Oh,
to get
no,
out there
no.
and work with a car, but then the authorities come and take away your only, and then make the situation worse. Isn't that a
Yeah.
weird kind of world that we live in? Where's the support there? It's
Well, this is it, mate. Exactly that. And I'll come to it, but that's where Sapper stepped in. But yeah, I couldn't believe it. I don't want to say this to sound sexist or anything like that, but there was people living around me in the flats that I was living in that, you know, females, for example, that were in a similar position, and getting help, really, getting help. And just, I felt, because I'm a guy, that, we're different, it doesn't really matter. And whereas I was getting evicted and other people were getting help, I just thought, right, this is it, I'm done. I've lost my faith in the system. I've lost my faith in all of it. There was just zero. I'm not trying to say that I needed somebody else to pick me up and help me, but I think when you've got a child and you're a single parent, to get it to a point where you're allowing them to go on the streets is not good. That something needs to change. I'm a UK citizen. I served in the armed forces, and like so many other guys do, and women do as well. I felt completely disrespected, I must admit. It was my fault. I let myself get to that position, but no, I would never like to see that happen to anybody, even if they hadn't served their country, let alone having served their country. It didn't feel right at all. I was angry.
Yeah, and again, this is the bit that sometimes I can't get my head around it. We're in 2024 now, and some of the kind of poverty that we witness from my profession that I'm in now, I can't grasp that there's that level of poverty in the world right now. And then like servicemen and all sorts of people from all sorts of
Yeah.
backgrounds ending up on the streets. We're in a very kind of sort of westernized, for want of a better word, kind of country that's got loads of money, and I just don't get it. I just don't get
Neither do
how
I.
that can happen.
Neither do I. No, it's something I think about a lot, and I think certainly as you get a bit older and a bit wiser, and you start understanding how things work a little bit, to think, the amount of money that's being thrown around these countries, and to think that people are still living on the streets, it's just nah. I am. It's a disgrace. That's what it is. It's an absolute disgrace. You know what really got me more than anything? I hate to bring it up, but when that COVID thing happens, all of a sudden, in a time when we're in a crisis and a recession because no one can work, all of a sudden they can find somewhere to put all the homeless people. And as soon as COVID finishes, they kick them straight back out on the streets again. So I'm just like, what's going on?
Yeah, very, very
That's the world we live
political,
in,
isn't
pal.
it? It's always. Yeah, it is, mate, and you're not wrong at all. And there's all sorts of avenues that you can talk about with that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, and it is crazy, and it's like it's all a political agenda. I don't do politics for that
No,
reason,
good.
because I end up getting absolutely annoyed
Yeah.
by it.
Mate,
I live my life, I look after the people closest to me, and that's the main
exactly.
thing,
Mate, do you know what? I've stopped watching the news a long time ago.
Same.
I stopped listening to radio. I don't listen to anything. And I tell you what, I'm a happier man for it. I tell you that for free.
100%,
And ironically,
100%.
yeah, happier man for it. I would advise it to anyone.
Yeah, I do not watch any mainstream media. I do not listen to it because I find it all biased. I find it all
Yeah,
like it's an agenda. They have an agenda. They put it out
yeah,
there, and I don't need it in my life. It's all doom and gloom as well, and I don't need it.
yeah.
I
Nothing
do not need
positive.
it.
Nothing
No,
positive.
nothing positive from all. No, I know where you're coming from on that front. So yeah, you talk of a kind of, you're now homeless. You've ended up proper in a bad place. So you talked of an organisation there stepping in to help you out. Is that right? Is that when that happened?
Yeah, so just before Caitlin left, a guy called Dave Singletary from South Wales, he was head of South Wales Sapper, really great guy, ex-Reg. He was amazing. He really was. Sapper, a veterans charity that have been going since, I believe, beginning of before the First World War. They're the longest military charity ever. And I could go on about that sort of stuff all day, but the truth is, he was relentless with me, mate. He knew that I wasn't opening doors to anybody. He knew that when he hadn't heard from me for months, something was up. And he went above and beyond to come round my house, even when he knew I was hiding around the corner, when he was knocking the door to try and ignore him. And he was just so good. And he was pivotal in making me feel like, having come from the situation I was in, where I just felt so betrayed and so angry about not receiving at least any kind of compassion or help. He was the first person that sort of made me feel a little bit of that again. So when Caitlin left and he helped with all of this, you know, he was instrumental in making sure this could happen and everything like this. When Caitlin left, it was then, you know, that I'd spoken to Dave only the day before I made the biggest decision of my life. And it helped to kind of inspire me, if you like. So I owe a lot to that guy. And yeah, wonderful, wonderful charity, mate. And yeah, without them, I'm not sure where I would have been.
It's good hearing a first-hand account there of, you know, like I wouldn't go as far as to say a success story, because you still had a lot of hurdles to face and obviously what you went on and did. But, you know, it kind of, they were instrumental in really, really kind of helping you and kind of getting you in a better place. And
yeah,
like
totally, mate. Totally. I felt a little bit sort of like, you know, all good for the British Legion and stuff, all this sort of stuff. But I very much felt with them, it was, you know, here's some Asda coupons. And, you know, as much as I needed it at the time, I didn't really need that. You know, I needed just to have a chat with somebody. So, yeah, Sapper were the only sort of charity, military charity, that really stepped in and come and see me rather than ask me what I needed for things, if that makes sense. You know, I couldn't have cared less about a new washing machine or a fridge or anything like this. Like white goods. I just needed someone to sort of say, hey, mate, it's going to be all right. Do you know what I mean? We're here to help. And that's exactly what they did. And it was, yeah, amazing. Really amazing.
Yeah, the first port of call is to try and sort you out, so then you can then sort your own life out, isn't it?
Exactly
So
that. Exactly that.
that's the first port to sort you out as an individual and kind of, you know, get to the root of it. So
yeah.
Where did you come up with? So I'm assuming this now leads on to you coming up with the idea to because it's not. Let's be honest. It's not exactly the most normal of ideas I've ever heard at the time, but you know, you kind of you decided, right, this is what I'm going to do. So yeah, tell the followers and the viewers what you decided was going to happen next.
The day Caitlin left home, I took her to the train station, and I was just destroyed. I like I said to you before, you know, the whole feeling of, you know, if there's one thing I didn't want to fail at, it was being a parent. And don't get me wrong, when I say fail, she's an amazing woman. You know, she's a young woman now, and she's absolutely amazing. I haven't failed. Looking back, I gave myself a bit of a hard time over it all. She's amazing, but the day that she went, I was crushed. I felt like I was a complete failure then. So one thing that had always sort of kept me going was being outside and surfing. I just plowed any moment I could into going for a surf. It's the only time that I forgot about everything. And I walked straight down to the beach with my surfboard. It was like a 10-mile trek just to get down there. Went for a surf in this massive swell. I shouldn't have gone out in it, but I just didn't care. I wasn't suicidal, mate. I'm not that kind. I don't have that in me. I'm too much of a coward, I suppose. I've never wanted to die, you know, or anything like this. And I certainly didn't want to ever leave Caitlin in such a position. So I wasn't suicidal, but I wasn't thinking right to going the sort of rough seas that I went into. But either way, something happened, mate. And, you know, I wrote about this in a book that it was the first battle. It was monstrous. There's no explaining, unless you're in the water in really big seas and big waves. There's no explaining what that's like. And it's so scary. But I somehow managed to catch the one wave that was probably only surfable that day. And I landed on the beach. And it was the first time in so many years that I just felt like, you know, I put myself in an awful position, but I'd won that fight, if you know what I mean. And it gave me this little tingling inside. So I walked up to the top of the cliffs at the beach, and I looked down at the coast, and I didn't want to go back to the flat. To me, it was just an empty, dark shell, especially now that Caitlin had gone. Yeah, so something just popped in my head, mate. Just said, walk the UK coastline. And without even considering what that meant, the most important thing was that it just gave me this really exciting adrenaline sort of rush course through me, if you like. And I just thought to myself, do you know what? That's actually not a bad idea. If something feels really, really good in a time like this, go with it. Just go with it. Follow it. So I walked back home along the coast, and yeah, a couple of days later, I was gone.
Wow, packed up your kit and decided, right, that's what
Oh
I'm
yeah,
going to do.
I would have gone there and then, but I had no money at all at this point. You know, I had to do a couple of days because I didn't have any of the gear. I had no tent, so I ended up just borrowing like a tent off an ex-reg bloke, Dom. I had a hole in the top of it. I borrowed a pair of my brother's boots that didn't fit me, and I looked terrible. You know, I just didn't have any of the right gear whatsoever. But I didn't care. I just didn't care. I just needed to. I wasn't running away from the situation. I think it's the wrong way to put it. It was more. I knew that I needed just to be extracted from the position that I was in, and someone just put me in the middle of somewhere so that I could just have a little think and reassess to come back into it, if that makes sense. So, the idea in my head was that the further I got away from Swansea and from the people that I felt were chasing me all the time, you know, money and all this sort of stuff, the more I can just take a little step back and reflect. So I literally left on the 1st of August 2017 with, I had a tenner to my name, 2 days worth of rations. And like I said, nothing really worked. Any of the gear that I had, my mate Chris had given me this almost Rambo style knife. And I thought, oh, goodness me. But I didn't care, mate. I had no idea if this was going to work. I had no idea if it was possible. I had no idea where I'd be sleeping. I had no idea where I'd get money, but it felt good. So I went with it. And it was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, God. And I remember, I don't know how, because obviously for a while, I should imagine it wouldn't have been sort of common knowledge. The media wouldn't have got a hold of it.
No.
You know, there wasn't
No,
kind
they
of
won't.
the thing. Because I can't remember where I picked up your story. I can't remember. And I remember seeing a little bit of an article, and I thought, hold up. I was in depot with Christian, you know what I mean? So and then obviously I took, and I think I messaged you, and we never got to meet. Your messages you're coming down past, which we'll get onto East Anglia way, and I'd love to have come and done a section, but like I say, life gets in the way and
Yeah.
and everything else. But you kind of so you kind of set off hardly any money, kind of very little. So how did you kind of, was it people's goodwill then?
So in the beginning, you're absolutely right. Nobody knew what I was doing. Just a couple of friends, a bit of close family. So the first, I call it the honeymoon period. You know, I think for the first year, it was hard work, mate. You know, I wasn't eating. You know, I can only explain it as you're just tabbing every single day from the second you wake up till the second you go to bed. You've got all your gear on you. I had a lot of fine tuning to do with regards to what I needed to take with me and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, mate, I was losing so much weight. I looked so ill. Occasionally, I'd meet somebody on the coast who would stop and say hello. I'd tell them what they're doing. You know, they may fling me the odd fiver here and there. But essentially, the only major challenge, I didn't mind the cold and the wet. You know, being in the tent at night time, you know, it's something that I was used to. Like I said, it was the honeymoon period. So I was like, yeah, bring it on. I don't care. But the major challenge was food. I was really, really suffering. Although I was every now and then incrementally, you know, people would help me out a little bit. It just took a long time well, sorry, it didn't take a long time for me to realize that the only way that I'm going to finish this walk or complete it, and that was the only goal that was in my head, it was happening, was if I found a way to eat. So that's where I started learning how to forage. I was on the coastline, so there's abundances of food if you know what you're doing. So it was when I met a family somewhere on the Welsh coast that invited me in for a bit of lobster and a glass of wine with them all. Once I told them what I was doing, and they were on holiday, and I ran up to have a shower and stuff like this, and I just, my phone at the time, I just downloaded as much stuff as I could about foraging, and that was an absolute turning point for me. It really, really was. I hate shellfish, I hate mussels, I hate whelks, I hate limpets, all that sort of stuff. But regardless, you know, I just had to do this, mate. And whenever I felt hungry, I just gobble these things down. You know, maybe gag and made me feel sick, but after I'd eaten them, I felt great. You know, I felt great. So it took about a year and a half before the press started getting involved in it. I would say once they started getting to the Scottish Islands, that I always said, and I always knew in my heart that this could potentially gather some momentum, and that's where the money will come in for the charity when people see me suffer, if that makes sense. And I knew Winters in Scotland would do that, and that's exactly what happened. So it's probably around that time that you may have heard of us. Yeah, Winters up there.
More than likely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, God, I've done a couple of. We both probably had prior to that done a couple of exercises up on the island of Skye and that. And I know not only that, you've got the mosquitoes, the midges rather.
Midges, yeah.
Oh God, horrendous and that. So yeah, to do it the way you've done it is proper. Well, it's hardcore, isn't it? There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, do you know the winds on the islands? We've got a really windy day today, but in winter, the winds on the islands up here, for example, Shetland. Shetland is really unique. It sits in between two jet streams. You're further north. It's 1,000 miles north of you, where you are. You're further north than Bergen in Norway, and camping around places like that in a winter is quite dangerous, really. The Outer Hebrides is not a fun place to camp during winter either. It's just, you've done TEDx and all this sort of stuff. It's just like that times a million, but you're doing it for years. I think not the hardest part, looking back, the part I think I'm most proud of all of it, was just the relentlessness of every single day waking up. During the summer, you're getting eaten alive by midges, and unless people know what midges are, they are so brutal. You're getting eaten alive by midges. It doesn't get dark till God knows what time, so you can't sleep. And then in the winter, you're getting hammered by 60, 70, 80, 100 mile an hour winds in a tent, night after night after night for months and months until the winter finishes. So that's probably, of all of it, what I'm most proud of is the fact that somehow, and even now that I've had a bit more comfort after I finished, even now I just think, my God, that was brutal. It's like I would have done P Company week in, week out, knowing that I was going back to the block at night time to have some good food for years, rather than having to put up with all of that. It was really hard work, mate. Really hard work, but we got there.
Yeah, no, God, it's like you say, and I suppose like when you're out in them elements, obviously it's dead easy. There's only you that's doing it. You're your own boss. You can turn around and go, right, I've had enough now. I'm going back to my flat.
Totally.
I'm going there. But to continue to push, and I suppose you learn a lot about yourself when you're in them sixes. One, for a lot of it, you're on your own.
Yeah.
So being on your own in a normal environment, again, for want of a better word, in a kind of everyday environment is hard enough. Being in your own head, faced with those conditions, already kind of stating that you were suffering with the effects of mental health and your depression and stuff and anxiety. So it's a difficult place. So did you learn a lot about yourself on that trip? Well,
absolutely.
Certainly in the Scottish Highlands.
More so than I could have learned anything about myself anywhere else. Being on your own is really, really important. I think, having that time to reflect, but you need to be on your own in a place where you feel good, if that makes sense. And what it done for me, mate, is all of the stuff that I was thinking about before the walk. Once I started doing the Scottish Highlands, that's when things started getting wild with regards to I was going into wild areas, going into really barren and wild areas. And they are here in the UK, believe me. But what it had done is it stripped me back to just the most basic things that we actually need. And that's a bit of food, some water, a place to pitch a tent where you're not going to, get hypothermic if it gets blown away, and just not breaking a leg every day. It stripped me back to that. And that was my only focus every single day. So eventually, as time went on, the clutter of modern day life, if you like, started to disperse. It started not to matter to me anymore. And I started to realize how unimportant all of that stuff was. All of the stuff that I was worrying about, these major companies banging on my doors asking for money and stuff like this, they're not going to suffer for it. I just thought, what the hell? In the end, I just thought, what the hell was I worrying about? I annoyed with myself, but at the same time, it did exactly the purpose that I wanted, to take me away from the situation so I can regroup and figure myself out. But as for learning about yourself, yeah, mate, absolutely. Every single day you're on your own, you're not speaking to anybody. And that's a dangerous place to be if you're not in a good headspace. But if you are in a good headspace, and this is what nature does for you, it just takes away all of the white noise, and all of a sudden you find yourself surrounded by birds and mountains and, you know, beautiful views and all this sort of stuff, and that makes putting up with the winters and everything all worth it. I'd rather suffer for something that I love than I would obviously for something that I hate, and it was worth suffering for. Mate, it just completely, it really was just like pressing the complete reset button, not only to get myself away from all the nonsense of life, but also to just start figuring out a little bit about myself, which I've never done before. You know, I was 37 when I left, and it wasn't till about the age of 40, it was the first time in my life I knew a little bit about myself and who I was as a person, what I wanted to do with my life, and how I wanted to do it, and all the things that I wanted to ignore. And I couldn't be happier now because of it, pal.
Yeah, no, fair play. I think what's happened as a society, you know, without fear of offending people, but we've become a little bit kind
That's
of a
not hard.
lazy society. No, not hard at all. A lazy society. Everything's there. Everything's on a doorstep. You order stuff offline. Some people don't venture into the outdoors.
No.
They live on social media. They live on. And I'm a big advocate for the outdoors. I live right on the doorstep of the Peak District. I go out into the peaks quite a lot. I've just recently sold a camper van, but I had a camper van and go out into the peaks. Love it. Me and my partner, Hannah, she's a firefighter as well. She likes all the same things that I like. So it's the outdoors is there, and I think hopefully you'll kind of, well, I know you will kind of agree with me on this. It's like, even if it's for a couple of weeks or a week or even a weekend, to get yourself back to kind of nature and get away from that everyday hustle and bustle, it's got to be good for mental health, hasn't it?
Oh, I don't think it's good for mental health. I think it's vital for it. I really do. It's surprising the effects that it can have, and just like I said, just getting away from, you know, it's such a consumer society that we live in, and so people are always trying to sell you stuff and get the newest this, get the newest that. None of it is important. None of it matters. And I understand it for younger generations. You know, we were probably a bit like it ourselves, but certainly for older generations, mental health a lot of the time is, you know, being unable to deal with things that you know you have to deal with, but for whatever reason it is you can't. And that's how, for me, things prolonged, because I just wasn't dealing with it. Coming outside, living out in it, being part of it, suddenly put things in perspective. It made me feel how insignificant I was. You know, almost like I was a bit arrogant for having problems and feeling that my problems were worthy of anything, because do you know what? They weren't. They weren't really actually problems. I just lived in the same world as what I think the Western world lives in at the moment, and that's of, if you don't have all of this stuff, you're not succeeding. If you don't own this, you're not succeeding. And for years and years and years, and if you're the kind of person that doesn't live for all of that, it's a hard world to live in. You know, it's a hard world. I was noticing all my friends, you know, they were saving up and they wanted another house, or they wanted more cars, or they wanted this, and this. And all I wanted to do when I finished work was go for a surf and have a bit of fun, you know. So I felt so alone in that respect. And yeah, being outside, I got to do all of it. Yeah, like you said, being my own boss as well, that's really important. And yeah, turn the life around, mate. I wish more people would do stuff like that. I really do.
Yeah, it is, and we all fall into that trap. I try my best not to.
Yeah.
And I've said it a million times. I don't really consider myself overly materialistic. I do like nicer things as I got older, and a bit of
course.
comfort
Yeah.
and everything else. But I'll settle for a week away, living out of a camper van or living out of a tent. I'm not bothered either way. But it's
amazing.
Yeah, it's the way society is, isn't it? It's just, what can you do? So yeah, you've pushed up into Scotland. I've got to talk to you as well, because obviously there's quite a few kind of interesting life developments as you went. The first one I want to talk about, and I know it's probably a bit of a difficult topic, but I want to talk about Jet.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? Did you just find Jet along the way?
So yeah, I was in a place called Irvine on the west coast of Scotland, and there was a family that had Jet that were unable to have her for whatever reason. She was very, very thin. You know, she'd been used as sort of like a working dog where she'd go out hunting and stuff like that. And they kind of starve the dogs to make sure that they go and hunt to the best of their abilities. And it's not necessarily something I agree with. But yeah, mate, I was just in the right place at the right time. And I'd heard about her. And I met Jet's owner very, very briefly, literally a 5-minute brief. And then I just took Jet for a little walk on a lead, sat on a bench with her, and mate, I saw something in her. You know, I think she deserved the one-on-one attention, and I wanted to give that to her. I did think at the time it was a bit of a gamble, you know, having something else or someone else to depend, you know, that's going to depend on me. But I don't know. I just saw something in that dog, mate, and I went up to him immediately and was like, "She's coming with me." You know, simple as that. And that's what happened. And that was a real turning point in my life. Dogs are just amazing, and I got to spend every single living moment with her. I never went. I was always working, but she was part of my job. So she took. She also helped me to take my focus off. I'd only got her after 9 months, so she started taking my focus off of me a little bit. She started to dictate the pace of the walk, whereas I was kind of rushing through it before, you know, in my head, right, okay, I'm going to do 20 miles, rah, and all this sort of stuff. All suddenly it was for her now. So I didn't want to overwalk or anything like this. So she just taught me to slow down a little bit and take things in a little bit more. And so I was taking more rest breaks for her. And I'd sit there and go, oh, bloody hell, that looks awesome. You know, started doing videos and taking more photos. And that was all down to her because I wasn't doing this before. And yeah, she was a life changer. And going around starting to do the islands and all of the really, really barren parts, the parts that are completely wild, just untouched. She helped me get through so many of that. And I don't mean help me get through emotionally, but I mean physically. We were traversing mountains and I couldn't find paths to get down. It was all overgrown depending on what time of year. You know, you get the summer and you get all the fern. So a lot of the time you couldn't see, but she was just sniffing out all of these old deer tracks. And she would flush out a deer. We would then get to a point and sit for 10 minutes and wait to see if this deer, because they always dash down the bottom of the mountain, always 100% of the time. And then if I saw that deer sprint out at the bottom, we knew there was a path down. And she did that for me time after time after time. So having her in the tent at night time was just amazing. She was my hot water bottle. As long as she was near me, she was always happy. So it didn't matter if we were in huge storms or anything like this. She'd always be up on her back, just being goofy. And God, mate, I love that dog. You know, more as much as I love my own children. I really mean that.
But you kind of, you never knew when you picked. Obviously, she didn't really know of her age or anything, did you? When you got her?
No, I didn't. It was only really I was told she was about 5 by people, but no, I didn't. It was only later on, you know, when Jet was getting older that I started having to do stuff with vets that they kind of gave a diagnosis of how old they thought she was. So before she went, I think she was around 12, 13.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So she was a good age, and like,
Yeah.
look, like losing a pet is hard when it's just, I don't know, I don't want to say a normal pet because all pets are important, but like
Yeah.
just when you have a dog, but to go on that journey like with her and to be with her constantly for how many years you had her with you, you know, that is a difficult one, and like I do feel for your pal, and
Thanks,
it's
mate.
not a very nice thing, but so yeah, kind of she was with you the whole way. And
Yeah.
also I want to talk about the kind of the book element, because obviously that was part of one of the islands in Scotland where you kind of, well, I'll let you tell the story. What's the book about? What's the book called? What's it about, and how did it come about?
Well, I've done 2. The first book, I've been having publishers get in touch with me. Oh, blimey, from I would say when I was in the Outer Hebrides, but I was never in this for any of that kind of stuff, mate. I really, really wasn't. So I was kind of just mugging them all off. You know, you thought they'd jump into the opportunity of doing these sort of things, write a book, get some money in, but I just didn't care. I was just enjoying the journey, and I didn't want anything corporate in the way. So it was a bit later on after, well, I'll say after I'd met Kate, basically. Sorry, before I'd met Kate. The book comes before I met Kate. So it was the first part of my journey, up until I reached a point called Hildesay. So I was in Shetland, walking. I'd just done a winter in Shetland, and I knew nothing about COVID, nothing about it, absolutely nothing. I wasn't watching anything. Only occasionally I'd hear someone talk about it. But one day, a fisherman, it was around about March 24th, a fisherman came up to me when I was camped up, and he just said to me, mate, we're going into a full lockdown tomorrow. What the hell are you going to do? I was like, what do you mean a lockdown? I can understand what he meant. So he said, well, because of this virus, people are going into lockdown. They're not allowed to leave their homes. How, I've got an option for you. If you want to go and live for the whole duration of the lockdown, at the time, I think we only thought it was going to be a few weeks. There's an island out to sea called Hildesay, which is an uninhabited island, about 108 hectares of land, that has basically some sheep on it. So go and stay out there if you want. I'll give you a lift on the boat, literally in the morning. So that's, without even thinking, I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Living on my own island. That sounds great. So we'd had no idea it was going to last for 3 months. But yeah, me and Jet just went over on this little boat to this island of Hildesay, where I was just foraging for food, foraging for lobster. We were getting supplies come over every now and then, and fresh water. But otherwise, mate, it was just such a magical, freezing and windy time. It really, really was. And so the book is called Finding Hildesay, and it's the first part of the journey from me, with snippets of my life beforehand. And then for me, I always worried before I went over to Hildesay on the boat, because I thought that maybe the walk was a plaster. I'd been so busy that the second I'd stopped, maybe this was all going to come back again. So I was really worried about it. And it was my main thought going over on the boat. But when, after the 3 months of being there, I realized that not only was it not a plaster, I was so happy. I was one of the few that absolutely thrived through lockdown, because my whole mentality had gone back to the same mentality to say, joining the Paras. It was just like everything was right. I'm gonna nail this. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna come out of this better. And I came away from Hildesay at the end of lockdown fitter. I'd put on weight. I'd learned more. I'd learned foraging. I'd thought about what I wanted to do once lockdown was over. So I went the way of lockdown, of making it something that could really benefit me. I know that I had 108 hectares of land to roam around on, but by no means was it easy. I wasn't speaking to anybody. I had to save all my battery power for emergencies and stuff like this. So I really didn't speak to anyone really for the whole time. So I realised that I was the happiest I'd ever been in my entire life whilst I was on that island. So that's why I called it Finding Hildesay. It's kind of an analogy for finding happiness.
Yeah, well, you're definitely in that sort of circumstance. You're gonna find yourself, if anything, aren't you? You're gonna find kind of almost like what you're made of. Again, like we talk about being in your own head and everything. So, was you on there in a tent, or did you have like an old building or anything to stay in, or like a ruin or anything like that? Was it?
Yeah, originally I was in a tent, and then the owners got wind, because they own the island. There's different laws up here. You're allowed to walk on places if people own it. It's the right to roam. But the owners of the island, the brother sadly passed away, and he had built a little house on there. It was like a Scandinavian style house on there, that hadn't been obviously used for 7 years since after he passed. So when they realised that I was over there, they got in touch, and they brought the keys over by boat instead. It had no running water, electricity, or it was actually colder inside that house than it was outside, because it was just a shell inside, if you know what I mean. But being in a tent, the reason it's so relentless is because you can't move around in it. I had a little one-man tent with me and a dog. So on the days that it was brutal and we just had to be in the tent, sitting down in a tiny little tent for days on end, bad weather is just awful. So I was so relieved to have somewhere that we could just walk around, stand up in, cook my food on a workbench, if you know what I mean. So that made all of the difference. So I was really just appreciating the little things in life so much more. Although I didn't have running water or anything like this, I had to, when the boat came, I had to tie ropes around my waist and drag all of the water up to the other end of the island. I got off on it, mate. It was amazing. It really, really was. It was so much fun.
Yeah, that way, like I say, like it proper makes you appreciate the fact that you had just had a place to stand up and cook. You were dead chuffed with. What's that about?
Afterwards, when I went to a place where there was a tap you know, I'm not trying to sound like I've been on a desert island for the last 30 years, but it really does put you to a point where, my God, this is so great. It's just a tap. I can fill it up rather than having to collect water, filter it, boil it, all this sort of stuff. And yeah, it was, like I said to you before, it just brings you back to the basic things, the way we used to live, you know, re-cements you with the basic things that we need and how unimportant a lot of the other stuff is. So yeah, I really, really appreciate the little things. The fact that I'm sitting under a roof now doing this with you is nice. You know, it's really, really nice. But that's just something everyone takes for granted now.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'll come on to how you've found kind of coming back to, again, like I say, normality towards the end. But obviously, so you've come off Hill to say you've kind of cracked on with the rest of the coast and everything else. So whereabouts did you kind of, because again, it's a weird kind of love story, isn't it? Like you kind of wandering around aimlessly around the country, you know, on the coastal roads, and then you bump into your kind of future partner. How has that come about?
Mate, all I know is this, right? All those years of going out to nightclubs when we were younger, sprucing ourselves up, putting aftershave on, and all I had to do was go and sleep in a tent, be minging, not shave or wash for a couple of years, and Bob's your uncle, you know. If only I'd known. But no, Shetland. I just finished Shetland. Lockdown was over, and I got back onto the mainland. So I was on the northeast tip of Scotland, and COVID had just finished, obviously. And Kate had gone on a wild. So she's an adventurer herself, and she had been wild camping around Scotland. For her birthday, she just thought that's her birthday present to herself. And on the very last night, I was at a place called the Wallago Steps, camped up at the very bottom of like 400 steps that go down this lovely bit of grass, but it was a really rough day. And yeah, she just came down, mate. By this time, I had a big following, and everywhere I went, people were stopping and talking to me, just everywhere. Honestly, it really felt like there was not a single person on the coast who didn't know what we were doing or who we were. I say that, I mean me and Jet. So there were other people talking to me, and Kate just kind of bimbled in and like almost rudely interrupted them and say, "Oh, you seem really interesting," and then asked me a couple of questions, and then just dashed off. And then she came back down about 40 minutes later, once everybody had gone, with 2 cans of Tennent's and some fish and chips, and just asked if she could come and camp up for the night. So I was like, you know, winner, winner. But not like that. It wasn't like that. She just, I think Kate's she gets intrigued very easily. So she didn't hear enough of the story, and she obviously trusted me. She had never heard of me before, what I was doing, and yeah, we just stayed up all night chatting about adventuring and all this sort of stuff, and completely clicked. There was nothing otherwise intended, if that makes sense. We just were friends, and we swapped numbers when she left, kept in touch for the next 6 weeks, and I think it was then, you know, we just kind of fell for each other, mate. And she decided she went to Afghanistan on holiday, as you do, to go and climb some.
Yeah, well, of course.
Yeah, as you do, you know. That's what I mean. It's different, you know, to anyone that I'd met before. And she went climbing the mountains up in Afghanistan and stuff like this. And then when she came back, she came straight up to come and see me and just said, right, I want to come and give up everything and all my lush 10-year career that went to St Andrews University for, to come and adventure with you. So she come and join me, and that was that.
Wowza. So there's 2 things I'm taking away from that. Is your third book should be dating tips from Christian Lewis. How to pull in the Outer Hebrides, so sound. Yeah. And secondly, you're easily to win over. A couple of cans of Tennant and a chip shop. Is that it? God, you are easily pleased, don't you?
Oh, brilliant.
Happy days, mate. So yeah, God, that is a really, really good story, because in all the unlikely places in the world, you know, you bump into someone, and then that's your kind of, and she continued the rest of the journey with you throughout.
Yeah. So the thing about what we were doing was Kate and I were together all the time again. So, but you think of a normal person's kind of relationship life. It's sort of, you know, you meet a woman, you go into work and all this sort of stuff. So you probably see each other in the evenings or at weekends when you're both off. But for me and Kate, we were together all the time, 24/7, sleeping in a one-man tent at the time. So things were really sort of tight in that respect. So we knew after about a year that if we hadn't killed each other by this point, that you know, we're good, we're cemented. So we talked about other adventures that we wanted to do. Kate had always wanted to have children. I was really open to the idea of having it again. So we just decided, sod it. If we're going to do it, we may as well do it now whilst we're in the UK. No pun intended there. But So Kate and I, this is here. Kate and I found out we had a broken roll mat. We were down in England on the East Coast somewhere. The roll mat had broken, and Kate had felt weird for a couple of days. It was just it was her birthday on the 26th of August, and she did a pregnancy test on the 26th of August, 2000 and God 20, I think it was 21 even. And found out that she was pregnant whilst we were just sleeping on some hay bales. And but
Wow.
mate, what a woman! She sort of, I think most people by that point would have said, right, we need to stop this. We need to go and get a house, get some jobs and, start living steadily again. But she's like, no way, we're finishing this, and I'm going to walk until I give birth, and I'm going to still sleep in the tent, and I'm going to still do all of this. And she literally did, mate, until 3 weeks up before she gave birth. And it was one day we were sleeping in a building that had an old leather sofa in it. And I just saw her lay down on this sofa and her belly was overhanging the sofa. And I just said to her, mate, like, enough's enough now. I can't, I'd have to do the manly thing here and sort of say, right, we're finishing the walk for a second until you've given birth. And yeah, she did. We finished for a couple of months to give her a chance to get better. She had a bit of a complicated birth. And then, yeah, straight back on it afterwards, but this time in tow with a little baby.
Wow, that is incredible, mate. That really, because like you say, a lot of people like having a child for a lot of couples, and quite rightly so as well. It's probably the biggest and hardest experience that most people will have. But to do that when you're kind of walking, kind of round the UK as well is quite incredible. So hats off.
Mate, it was amazing.
To that part.
It was hard work. And 3 days after Magnus was born, I had a deadline to finish my book by the end of that month, and I hadn't even started it. No, sorry, I had 3 months left to write my book. It was Magnus was born on the 1st of May. I had to hand my book in August. So 3 days after he was born, I started writing the book. So not only were we, trucking around the UK trying to find places to camp up and sleep and all this sort of stuff, but I was powering my energy every second that Magnus was asleep. I was writing and then trying to help Kate with Magnus and all this sort of stuff. So it was bloody hard work, mate. But it just goes to show you, I think sometimes, people forget that we've only had central heating since the 70s. Hospitals have only been around 100 years, otherwise we'd be living like that anyway for 500,000 years. So it's only recently that we've become a bit soft. And we knew that, and we were good at what we were doing. So we were totally competent in that respect and knew that we could, look after Magnus and Kate as we continued. So yeah, we did.
It's in us all to kind of have that capability. It's like you say, it's just we choose not to because we have these luxuries, but it's it's genetically built into us to live like that should we need to and suffer hardship if we need to. And you've proven that. I want to go back there to what you said about you didn't kill your missus, you've made it to a year. And the reason why I can kind of relate to that is like I work and live with my partner. We work on the same shift.
Fist bump, feel for you, mate. Fist
bump. We kind of, we work, we live, we train together, everything else. And everyone says to me, they're like, how do you do it? And I say, well, it's easy. And I wasn't 100% sure it was going to work. I thought we're 5 years, 6 years in now, whatever it is. And it's a bit like, how have we not got sick of each other? But I've met her a little bit later in life. I didn't meet her till I was like 39, 40. Sure. And she's a bit younger than myself. And I see it was, well, I've missed that 40 years of being with you, but now I get to spend every kind of day with you and work with you. And I really like it, you know?
Me too. Yeah, me too. I agree.
It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. A lot of people do say that they would have killed each other, like I say, but I like it. It works for us and everyone's different. So yeah, if it works for you,
if you're compatible, mate, isn't it? If you're compatible and it works, for me, I met somebody doing something that I really love doing, being outside and being an adventurer. So I met an outside lover and an adventurer. And so that works, and I'm sure, you two, it's a similar thing, isn't it? If you enjoy doing the same things, you live and work together and everything like this. And yeah, it's amazing, mate. It's a lovely thing. And I do think age has a lot to do with that. You start to sort of like the dust settles in here a little bit and you start becoming a bit more relaxed with everything and, realize that life's a bit more fragile than it once was. And kind of you've got to enjoy these things while you can. And I don't think there's anything better, mate. For me personally, my biggest success right now is the fact that I get to be with my son and my missus all of the time. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So, money, whatever, all that sort of stuff. real success is the fact that I get to be around the people that I really love all the time. So perfect.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant, mate. It is, and yeah, no, absolutely, pal. And like I say, hats off. That's mega. But yeah, so okay, you've come down. You had this little bit of a break. You took a cut. What do you say? You took 2 or 3 months out.
I think about 2 months. Yeah, 3 months. Let's just say 3 months. I can't remember.
And whereabouts did you stop the walk, take the break, and then where did you pick up from? So obviously the same places where you stopped.
Yeah,
Whereabouts was that?
We finished in Hastings on the south coast of England. So we stopped it there. We went to Dorset to have Magnus in a yurt, and then it was around this time Jet had a massive operation as well. She had cancer, and she had 6 months lumps removed. So we had to go back to Kate's mum's for a little bit, to go and stay with her up in Malvern. And then once she was better and everything like this, then we went back to Hastings, basically ready for winter. So we went straight back out onto the walk, as we were coming into winter, which we did sort of, went over to all the southern islands, the Isle of Wight, Scilly Isles, all of these places. So we've done all of those, the Channel Islands. That was pretty brutal, I have to say, because it was really windy out there. It was really cold. Magnus was really young. So it was the hardest part of all of that was like sterilizing all the bottles and getting all that sort of stuff sorted.
Oh,
it was relentless, mate. It really, really was. That's when the creature comforts, like a kettle and stuff like this, really come in handy. Whereas we were having to do it all by a little gas stove, which was hard work. But pretty brutal. But do you know what though, mate? If it goes to show, Magnus was never ill. We slept out in minuses weather. We did a program with Ben Fogle. We did Lives in the Wild, and it was like -3, -4 where we were staying. And Magnus slept better than any of us. He was never had a cold or anything like this. And it was really showing to us that sort of lifestyle that we were giving him from the start was really cool. Really cool.
Yeah. I saw the program you did with Ben Fogle, and I thought it was excellent. And you're right, that kind of building up your immune system with being outdoors and the whole central heating thing and coming in and out of cold, and then it kind of lowers the immune system. It makes us a little bit weaker.
100%.
And so you've probably bulletproofed him hopefully for life with his immune system.
I hope so.
By doing that, mate. Yeah, definitely, pal. Well, put me in touch with Ben Fogle. I want him on an episode of the podcast.
Oh, he's a good boy. He is. I'll have a chat with him, mate. I will.
Yeah, have a chat. Get him on. So yeah, kind of. Am I right in thinking around this time you not adapted it? You were still walking the UK, but you kind of invested in a camper van for Kate and Magnus and Jet to kind of spend a bit more time.
I got some money for signing for the book deal, so we just invested all of that into one, having the funds to be able to finish the walk and day-to-day things that we needed, but two, honestly, mate, if I'm honest with you, it was probably 40% Magnus, the reason I got the van, and 60% Jet, if I'm honest, because Jet, after the operation, wasn't quite the same. She wasn't quite the same, and I made a promise to her a long time ago when we were up in the Outer Hebrides during winter, and the one thing that Jet didn't like was being really cold when it was windy and wet. But she'd always plough through it for me. So I made a little thing in my head that, mate, the second you need it, I'm gonna make you bloody comfortable. And when you need to retire, whether we're still on the walk or whether we're not, either way, I'm gonna make life comfortable for you. So the van was more of a means to make sure that Jet didn't have to walk any more than she had to. And also, more importantly, because we had a kid now, whereas before, coming down the East Coast, we were kind of relying on other people to help get us to a shop if we needed it, if that makes sense. So followers would get in touch with us, say, look, if you need anything, if you need to get taken to a shop, which would often mean coming off the coast and extra miles and all this sort of stuff. We didn't want to have to rely on if Magnus suddenly became ill or anything like this, or he hurt himself or we hurt himself. We just wanted to be able to rely on ourselves for that rather than other people. So yeah, that's the main reasons that we got the van. And it kind of proved absolutely vital, because not long after this, Kate really hurt herself. Jet really started to decline. So I was kind of left in a position where I think it was around Devon sort of area that, I've somehow got to finish this with a dog that can't really walk much anymore, an injured missus and a baby now. So I think that last part, despite all of I put up with in the Outer Hebrides and all the physical hardships, if you like, the last part of the walk was probably the hardest of all of it. With absolutely 100%.
Wow, I wasn't,
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect that. Like you say, because obviously the winters in the north of Scotland and the Shetland Islands is obviously harsh environment. So,
Yeah.
but like you say, if you've got kind of admin issues and you've got
Yeah.
sort of sickness and illness and stuff like that, then it's difficult to kind of get the mileage in, and then the admin side of it becomes more difficult, doesn't it? So,
Yeah, totally. But it ended up sort of what I was having to do was Kate and Magnus ended up having to stay in places with people that they'd never met before, and I would then have to take Jet. We would go to a car park on the coast and say that I'd finished at the night before. I would then have to leave Jet in the van, sprint, because I knew how anxious she'd get if I wasn't there. I'd sprint down the coast, however many miles, to the next car park. Sprint. I was always true to my word. I didn't want to not cheat because to let anybody else, feel anything of me. It was more in my head. I couldn't just sit well with myself.
well, wouldn't you? If
Yeah,
you'd have
I
cut
would.
corners,
Exactly that. I wouldn't sit well with me at all. So I then have to sprint immediately back to the van. So the south coast of England, back up to Swansea. I did it twice, if that makes sense, and it was constant. I'd be running all day, running back to the car park, then drive the van round to the car park I'd just got to, getting out the van, running to the next car park. Sometimes it was only 2 miles, but sometimes it was like 5-6 miles. So it was just draining. And then in the evenings, I would then want to be there for Magnus and Kate to make sure that they were okay. The pressures of the book and everything like this, and then obviously coming towards the end. So in a weird way, I've been slightly brought back to not the rat race, that's the wrong way to say it, but a bit more. Scotland and its islands and the winters were brutal in a completely different way to what it was down the southeast of England. Really expensive down there. You can't park anywhere without paying. Mate, I'll just say it as it is. I don't care. But I got about 25 grand for signing for my first book, and that all got spent on car parks and campsites because you're not legally allowed to. I was spending more of my money than I was raising the money for Sapper, if that makes sense, just to be able to finish this walk. But we were finishing it, so whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's great. I've noticed that because when we had our camper van, we went down and spent about 2 weeks down in Cornwall when we first bought it, and it's like trying to find places to wild camp. And I know why. The reason, one, there's obviously big bucks in paying for campsites, and I get it. It supposedly goes back into the country and everything else. But also, some of the places that were absolutely beautiful that are parked up, and I've always been it's ingrained in me from my days in the military. They never leave litter around. But some of the places I've stopped where people, and there's just piles of litter and people have no respect, and dog poop bags hung up on trees. That's a pet hate of mine.
I mean, that is the most nonsensical thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Just kick it into the side off the path if you have it. You don't want to pick it up. It'll decompose. It's completely natural. But I know I'll put it in a bag that's not going to decompose for about 1,000 years and hang it like a little Christmas tree.
Yeah.
What do you know what I mean?
I actually caught somebody doing that once, and getting them a right earful for it. But yeah, crazy. But yeah, it is. I do get it. But I think a lot of people flock down to the south of England, maybe because of the distance. Not so many people flock up. They do the North Coast 500. But what I can say is you're legally allowed to camp here pretty much anywhere, and it's cleaner. It's far cleaner than anything else. So I think the more campers that are allowed to go out there will good campers, if that makes sense, could potentially, if you've got some really good campers allowed to camp all around the coast, and then you've got a couple of idiots come down that want to leave all their trash, I'd be the first person to say, "Oi, mate, take your trash with you." But because there's no one there and they're able to get away with it, they just leave it all there. So, and it works up here. Absolutely. It works up here in Scotland.
Well, there you go. It's proven that it does work, and like you say, a lot of there's a quid to be had, isn't there, by the government? So that's why they charge for everything. But no, so kind of, isn't it weird though, like that the bit that you're in the harsh winters and everything else, but it's carefree and less stressful, that you come back to again normality, publicity, public people, things, and then it instantly becomes a ball ache and stressful again, doesn't it?
Yes, instantly. Absolutely instantly. For me, mate, it was really quite sad that I never envisaged that I'd ever want this to finish the walk. I never ever thought that would be possible. But actually, sadly, towards the end, I was quite looking forward to it to being over. But more so because I just wanted to come back to places where I'm freer and you're allowed. There's so many restrictions down there, and unless you've been to other places that aren't like that, and it's normal, then you wouldn't know any different. But it's so monetized, and you can't even stand next to the Land's End John O'Groats sign down south without having to pay for a photo for it. You have to pay to be next to a piece of wood, and I just think it's ludicrous, and it took all of the fun out of it for me. I didn't feel free anymore. So the reason I wanted this finished was so that I can get myself and my family back up to where we're legally allowed to camp and are legally allowed to be outside, and you don't have to pay for everything you do. And what I mean by that is I don't think that you should have to pay all of the time to be out in nature, because there's a lot of people that can't afford to do that. So I was just looking forward to that, mate. So yeah, but eventually we did, mate. 6 years later.
6 years later, mate, and made it back. That is absolutely bonkers. And one thing, touch you back then, is I've probably the same as you. I've traveled right around the world and been to lots and lots of different countries. Travel's a massive thing, and it is different in different countries. Where you can kind of rules are different. But isn't it bizarre that you've just got like a country as small as the UK, and the rules are so different from one end to the other? It's just unbelievable, balmy, isn't it?
It's crazy. Yeah, it really is crazy.
Yeah. So 6 years, you came back. Was it? Well, I'm guessing I kind of know the answer already, but I suppose quite emotional coming walking back into your kind of hometown. Was there a big? There was quite a big following. You've obviously gathered a right following behind you as you've gone. But was there a lot of people turn out when you came into your hometown and that?
Oh yeah, it was crazy. I mean, we've been used to it anyway. People were always coming out. Mate, we would have people coming out with binoculars looking for us down the coast and stuff. It was crazy. I feared going through busy places because sometimes it would take us a whole day just to do a couple of miles because people were always coming up and chatting, which is lovely. Don't get me wrong, but I think coming back into Swansea was more. But the last time I was there, I really wasn't in a good place. So it was a real proud sort of feeling. One, to have done something that I'd set out to do, to complete the walk, but also the biggest promise that I'd made myself that when I crossed that line, I was going to make sure that I was a happy man again. But I'm not going to call them add-ons, definitely not. But to come back with a beautiful dog, beautiful missus, my best mate,
add-ons.
and a baby as well.
Don't call them add-ons. Don't call them add-ons, though. That made me chuckle there when you said that. No, don't call them. I'm not editing this. I'm not editing it out. You'll see it.
Please keep it there. Yeah, please keep it there. But these people had come onto my journey, and helping me now to forge a future. And I never expected any of that. The best thing about the whole thing was the fact that none of it was expected, none of it was planned, anything like that. And to be crossing that line not only happy and with a sense of purpose again, because that's so important, with a beautiful little family. And mate, finishing the line crossing over was very overwhelming. There were so many people there. We were doing so many press interviews and news, or Sky News, BBC News, they were all there. It was just crazy. So I didn't really get to take much in. I didn't even get a pint at the local pub for ages because I was just doing book signs after book signs. But it was only the moment when I had on my own, I suppose, that evening, when I heard everybody else. I was in the hotel, the King's Head down in Llangennith, and I was in the hotel room, and I just went up to the room whilst everybody else was down there. And Magnus was sleeping, Jet was just laid on my side, Kate was down in the pub with her family that had come down to see. And it was only when I heard everybody having their own bit of fun that I had that real moment for me of just, I'm not one to say that I would ever be proud of myself for anything like this, mate. But if ever I was going to fist bump myself, that was the little moment. And but if I'm honest with you, mate, because I'm happy again, and I know the importance of purpose and sense of purpose. Really, I just wanted to be like, right, what's next? Come on, let's go. Let's crack on with something else now. That's done. It's in the bag. I knew that Jet she hadn't been good for quite a while. I knew that she was on her way out. So that was always on my mind constantly. And I just wanted to give her as much comfort after the walk as possible, and show her the same respect that she had shown me through the walk. So we retired from all of the adventuring stuff until Jet passed only a month ago, just to give her, the dignity to kind of rest in peace, if that makes sense, literally. So yeah, only now have we come back out and started adventuring again. And yeah, but just without our poor little friend. Chris Walks the UK finished, not when the walk finished, but when Jet died. So I think I needed that closure, if that made sense, before I could move on to anything else. And now that she's gone, in her honor, we're just going to come out and keep adventuring, keep being free, and just living our best lives, mate. Simple as that.
No, mate, I can't fault you. And you know what? What an absolute crazy sort of just unreal expedition that you've done, absolutely. And like you say, it just proves that some things in life are just unplanned. The whole thing from start to finish, the meeting your missus to picking up, your lifelong companion in Jet, and kind of and all that kind of stuff, just on a whim, and just
mate,
kind of, and it just
totally winged it.
Power Edge way. It's the Power Edge way, mate.
Yeah.
But no, so that leads me on really to the kind of last question I've got for you, pal. Without, because I'm conscious I've kept you a while now. Is like literally, what is next? What have you got coming up? What do you fancy? So where are you now? You're out in the Outer Hebrides right now, is that right?
Yeah. We're on the island of Barra, in the most southern inhabited island of the Outer Hebrides. So we are currently filming for a series. We're currently filming for a series. We're not sure exactly what channel it's going to go on, but we're looking forward to it coming out. And I'm writing the whole thing myself, producing it myself, editing it all myself, doing all that sort of stuff. And mate, yesterday, for example, we were just in the most beautiful spots with dolphins, turquoise, perfect waters, amazing sunsets, filming all of this stuff. One thing that we realized, well, I certainly realized, and I know that Kate loves as well, is we just love showing amazing places off to people. We love doing that. But involved in that, we also love helping people as well. We ended up with 500,000 for Sapper in the end. And we just get a real kick out of doing stuff. When you've got a platform, to do anything a little bit out there and stuff like that, and not do it to raise money for charities, to me just seems ludicrous. So we're always going to do that. So yeah, we're just getting our fingers to grips with all of this sort of side of it, getting back out here, getting used to being outside all of the time again. And then we're going to start doing more extreme stuff. So who knows, might even walk around the world.
That would be absolutely brilliant. Well, I was going to make a suggestion to there. I mean, obviously you've not done Ireland. It'd be a shame to do the whole of like kind of the mainland UK and not do Southern Ireland, because I know Southern Ireland got some beautiful coastline.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Well, that's it. Exactly that. It was the UK, but yeah, I'd love to go and do Southern Ireland. We definitely will at some point. Definitely will. But I think for now, up here where it's just, mate, yesterday I sat up on top of a 1,000-foot hill, watching a sea eagle, filming a sea eagle hovering around me, and we're just going to take a little bit of time to, maybe just grieve a little bit for Jet, but not everybody will understand that. But she's my best friend, and just have a little minute to ourselves, regroup, film as much as we can, and then, yeah. Do you know what it is, pal? Our biggest asset is that we don't own anything, right? We've got a van, we've got a camper van, so we're not tied to anything. So we don't have much money, but we have enough to keep us going. And because of that, the world is our oyster. So if we come up with the great thing about having a partner that just is so in tune with everything that you do is the fact that if I say, Kate should go and live on an uninhabited island for 6 months, I know damn well she'll turn around and say, sounds awesome, let's go. So yeah, the world is our oyster now, pal. And our biggest asset is that we don't own anything.
Brilliant, mate. Absolutely brilliant. And look, it sounds like to me you're living your best life, and I'm glad. You've done what you've done, and you're in such, obviously you're kind of in a lot. Well, you're in a perfect place now, and you're loving life, pal. So I'd love at some point. No, good. Life's well on my part, mate. I cannot complain. Like it's been a journey over the years, as we've all been on a journey. But no, I'm in a very, very good place with everything. So thank you for asking.
Well done, mate.
But,
well done.
Well, hopefully I can catch up with you again in the future. Hopefully we'll stay in touch and bounce back and forth. I'll have a quick chat with you off air in a second, pal. But look,
Yep.
it's been an absolute pleasure. And for the
Mine too.
viewers and the followers, I think they'll absolutely love it, mate. Absolutely love it.
Mate,
It's been a brilliant
absolute pleasure. Cheers for having me on. And yeah, keep at it, pal. Thanks, mate.
Nice one, pal. Speak to you soon.
Bye. Bye.